Everybody is in the studio. James, Trista, D-Lo KC, we're so happy that you are here with us. First, before we dive into Kings business and NBA business, you mentioned an Aaron Rodgers story earlier.
Yes.
And shout out to Christina Warner, who shot a text, said, hey, I'm loving this. So happy everybody's in the studio. Could you shut up long enough to allow Trista to tell that? She didn't say that. Don't forget the story.
Always talking to Damian crazy. Always. Thanks to Christina for stopping the weather, though, by the way.
Yeah, she chilled it out. That's how meteorologists work. They turn the rain off. And thank you, Christina, for turning the rain off.
Shout out, because I didn't know if I was going to make it. I thought I was going to be stuck in Phoenix.
We had been watching pretty closely, like, oh, don't let this be crazy. But today has been kind of the chillest day. Tomorrow could be interesting while we're roaming around downtown Sacramento.
I brought an umbrella.
Thank you.
We'll see if it goes inside out.
I got a waterproof outfit for tomorrow.
Do you really?
But I do. I need to hear your. Does your outfit tomorrow sparkle like the one you're wearing now?
I brought that. I have some options.
Okay.
I have some options.
Yeah. James, does your outfit for tomorrow sparkle?
Yes. Rarely does it.
I believe James is in charge of the after plans, by the way. I don't know. That's good. I'm dead serious. I think James
got a booth at Tiger.
James is in charge of the after party. The Aaron Rodgers.
Kind of a big deal at the flat stick.
Flat stick is a good look.
It's James Ham, name dropper.
I'm gonna have to let him know.
Can you tell the Aaron Rodgers story?
So NFL honors. We're doing. I swear I've told this on the show, but if you haven't heard it already, fine. So we're at the NFL honors, and I'm working for USA Today, and you have to find, because we don't have like real reasons to be there. You have to find like fun video topics while you're there to make these montages, because nobody wants to sit around and have like a 2-minute random conversation with Von Miller. So we would ask the same athlete the same question over and over. And the question, there was a bunch of them, but one of the questions was, who's the most handsome man in the NFL? Like, who is that guy in the NFL? I forget how it was phrased. It was phrased better than that. Everybody was like, Luke Kuechly, Jimmy Garoppolo. Here, like that was the top, right? So we get to Aaron Rodgers, and I ask him, "Hey, we're asking everyone, who's the most handsome guy in the NFL? Like, who is that guy?" And he goes, "Oh, I can't tell you that because I'm a guy. I wouldn't know. Like, I'm not. You would have to ask a woman that question, not me." And I was like, well, a bunch of like other colleagues of yours have already answered. Luke Kuechly's kind of the favorite right now. Jimmy Garoppolo, no comments on that. He's like, I just can't answer that. I'm sorry. And I was like, that was just my me doth protest too loudly moment.
Aaron, a different cat, man.
I said, oh, this is a very. I felt awkward for you.
He's not my type of guy either, by the way. Just don't be vibing with Aaron Rodgers. I never have.
Never have.
Yeah, he's kind of stepped out there. He's kind of in the weird zone.
The Blade Runner zone.
Yeah.
Have you seen those long, like sort of, they're not quite cardigans. They're more than a cardigan. They're like a duster jacket. And he wears them in black.
Plus.
Yeah, they're like what you would get on Revolve if you're a woman, you know what I'm talking about? You get on, and they're just like long, drapey, goes all the way to the ankle, but they're gauzy. And he wears them every single post game. Every single one.
Actually, I haven't seen it. I don't know what you're talking about. That actually sounds nice. Like I might want to look.
You might want to look into it. He does it with the man bun as well, and he's got this whole like rock star.
Don't like anything about that dude. Just absolutely.
When did that start for you?
I don't. A couple of years ago.
Was it?
It wasn't the
when he was with Olivia.
Stuff.
What's her name?
I don't really get. He just comes across like a.
Jerk. Well, the problem
that
I've always had with him is everything is always somebody else's fault. You know, he takes all the praise and everything when everything's going good, but when it gets to the playoff time and he chokes like he always does, he wants to yell at his receivers, he wants to yell at the offensive line, he wants to look at the coach crazy, he wants to get to the post game and put the blame somewhere else. Hey man, this is part of the whole package, man. If you're going to be that guy, you need to be the guy when it's good and when it's bad.
You're getting Zach Wilson vibes from Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
Lack of accountability vibes.
Absolutely. There's always been lack of accountability. So I've never really.
Tom Brady yells at his guys too, though. Do you like Tom Brady?
Oh, he's fiery.
He is
well,
fiery.
What's the difference?
I don't like when he does that, though. But Tom Brady will accept accountability. And Tom Brady's won. So Aaron Rodgers is
A lot.
always this great, oh, Aaron Rodgers, he's amazing. 12 is amazing. He chokes every year.
That's part of it too. He's overhyped.
He chokes every year.
I think he's the best quarterback in football. Really, based on what? Tom Brady out there winning Super Bowls every year, and like the big smart NFL analyst comes out and says, I think he's just the best pure quarterback. Based on what?
Yeah, even last year, how did he win the MVP? Tom Brady was so much better statistically. And what, you just can't give it to Tom because he's old and
It's like you can't give the coach of the year to Andy Reid, I guess.
I guess.
Hey, we've been doing the show 2 years, 2 NFL playoffs. I said the same thing both years, right?
Yep.
I said
Yep.
Aaron Rodgers, the 13-3, whatever. When he gets to the playoffs, he's gonna choke his ass off, and it's happened both times.
Mhm.
So you want to see Aaron Rodgers in the playoffs?
I do enjoy seeing him lose
Yeah, I do want to see it
because I'm a hater. I'm just a straight hater.
I'll
I
be
am
hyped.
too.
Yeah.
And I'm with Kyle. I do think the Niners would beat the Packers. Like the Packers, the little run they're going
And
on
they're
right
afraid
now.
of the Niners, 1,000%.
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers.
They believe that the Niners.
I
for
think there are a
some
lot
reason-
of teams afraid of the Niners.
Yeah.
I think the most dangerous matchup for the 49ers in the postseason is the Cowboys. Because I think the
That's a
Cowboys
dangerous
want the
matchup.
49ers because they made complete fools out of themselves
Yeah.
last year. and
It
I
was
think they
so
know it.
bad.
Not
Yeah.
afraid of Dak though. Not afraid of him.
I wouldn't be either at this
I
point.
think the Eagles is the toughest matchup. I
I
agree
think it's
with Kyle.
Dallas. I think it's Dallas.
Does anybody here think if everything goes how it is right now, that the Cowboys are safe in Tampa Bay?
No,
Mm-mm.
no, I don't.
I think the NBA playoffs are just so different because it's one game and
Yeah.
it's just
Anytime.
one game.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I don't want to use the any given Sunday cliche, but it
Go
really
back to
it,
playing
it
in the
really
hood.
works.
Dallas really can pressure the quarterback. And
Mhm.
that's and so can Philadelphia. That's the
Yeah.
thing. Like if you're the Niners, that's what has to scare you. It's
Well,
that
Dallas has stopped
they're going
that
to get
though.
those.
Yep,
Dallas
last
hasn't
4 or
pressed the
5
quarterback
weeks.
in like a month.
Yep, last 4 or
I-
5 weeks. That's been rough.
I think
And
Dallas is chilling though.
The
Yeah.
secondary is banged up, like upon all hell. They're on their 3rd or 4th.
And that's part of the reason I
secondary.
think they're chilling. I think they're just trying to get through. And no one cares what the Dallas Cowboys are doing right now. They know they have to succeed in the playoffs.
There's a chance Dallas could win the NFC East, though.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a chance
Yeah.
they could be the number 1
Yeah.
seed
Yep.
in the NFC.
Yeah.
Those
That's
are all
crazy.
those
I
are
think
all
that
great
I
storylines
think
for
I
the
think the
weekend.
same thing that I thought last year when they went into the Niners game. That secondary, they have playmakers, but they're not very good. Trayvon Diggs is a playmaker. He will get burnt repeatedly if you're just patient.
The ultimate game changer for that game because I think both teams are better.
Mm.
The Cow, but than they were last year when they played in the playoff. But Christian McCaffrey to me is such
Oh
a
my
game
God.
changer for San
Mm.
Francisco.
Oh yeah.
And Dallas really struggles to defend the run.
Mhm. Yeah.
So bad.
And the 49ers haven't even fully opened the playbook.
I don't think they have.
I think
either.
they're just hanging
Yeah.
out. They're
Yeah.
they're slow playing this.
Debo coming back too.
Yeah.
Woo.
Well, that's
Woo.
why I mean, Debo's he hasn't even had that many carries on the year. So just wait till he's healthy and they start running all kinds of things with McCaffrey and then with him. It's
And
gonna be wild.
he's only had what, like 2 games with Christian McCaffrey? 2 or 3?
A little more than that. He's
It was
probably
more than
about 4
3?
or 5. Yeah, because
Oh, wow.
Christian came against the Chiefs,
Mhm.
and then
Yep.
Debo got hurt against the Bucks. So that's probably
I
like
don't
4 or
remember
5
how many
games.
that was. Okay.
Christian McCaffrey's been so
Well, they
damn
didn't
good
lose
this year.
either.
Right. Yeah. No, they that's just yeah. Not good enough to win coach of the year. That's the only thing I guess the
Nope.
49ers are going to lose.
Yep.
9-7-1. James, I saw you tweeting. Malik Monk didn't practice today. Any reason to believe he won't play tomorrow?
He's been dealing with a bunch of little things, right? He had the wrist injury, then a shoulder injury. Now he had, it looked like he had a TENS machine on his left calf and was in flip-flops today. So he did not practice. I don't think I'd be too concerned. Plus, I think he loves to play against the Lakers. It's a team that, decided to go other ways last year. So I wouldn't doubt that
It's worked out really well for them too.
Yeah, he's going to be up for that game. I would be surprised if he didn't play, but again, we don't know yet. Just like we don't know if they're going to waive somebody today or tomorrow. Like it's going to be like down to the wire.
Now, do you want to elaborate on that a little further? We've obviously seen a bunch of news come in from Shams and Woj, and the Lakers made some moves and guaranteed some contracts. What's the significance of that time frame as to why you brought that up?
Yeah, the Kings have 3 players who are on non-guaranteed contracts in Matthew Dellavedova, KZ Okpala, and Chima Moneke. If they're on the roster as of January 10th, then their contracts become fully guaranteed. And that means in order to clear waivers, you have to be waived. I think the deadline is tomorrow. It's January 7th. So we'll have to see what happens. Dellavedova is owed like $2.65 million on the season. So basically, you'd look at half of his salary coming back. With Shima, it's only $1 million, so $500,000. There's no way the Kings, I think, will waive Shima just because he's young. They don't have a second round pick this year. Sort of a guy that they're bringing along slow at the G League level. And then Casey Okpala, again, a budget guy. I think his contract's only like $1.7 million. So if you waive him halfway through the season, you don't have to pay that second half of their contract. And it doesn't really matter. I mean, you can pick up all of these guys' contracts and still waive them after the fact, but you have to pay the rest of the year. So it's just it's not about so much saving money as it is roster flexibility and everything else going towards the trade deadline, which is, looming next month.
Yeah, and that you answered that. That's what I was about to ask. Like, what would be the real reason for doing that? I mean, and especially like multiple guys. Like I could see maybe one guy, but you said it's not money. The money's already spent. It's already going to be spent. It's not really helping anything out, but it would be, for roster flexibility for a potential trade.
Yeah. So if you do a 2-for-1 at the trade deadline where you send out one player and bring back two, you're going to have to cut somebody. I mean, it's a hard cap of 15 players for the NBA roster. So this just allows you to cut somebody now while their money isn't guaranteed and you don't have to pay them out. It's a way of, I guess it is saving money, but there's also the situations where you get to the end of, right near the end of the deadline, and a team like we just saw with Boston, where they just traded Noah Vonleh to San Antonio, and they did that to get under the luxury tax. And so San Antonio picked up like a future second round garbage pick, which they'll never convey, but they also picked up probably $2 million more than what his contract was worth. So they made some cash on the deal. And so if you have that 15th roster spot open, it leaves you with the ability to do that. It also, like, if there's a big trade and some other team has to waive 2 or 3 people, well, then you can claim somebody if you have an open roster spot, or you can go sign somebody after they clear waivers at the deadline. So it's just a way to, again, free up a roster spot now that you could use down the road.
You're listening to D'Lo and Casey on KIFM West Sacramento, 98.5 FM, KRX QHD2 Sacramento, ESPN 1320, driven by Lashers, Elk Grove Dodge. Always live on the free Odyssey app, live on Twitch, live on YouTube as well. James Ham, Tristan Crick, both in studio with us here today. One quick thing I want to mention. We've had our fun with Tristan Thompson, but he is a former King. His mother passed away unexpectedly. We tell our TT jokes, but we'll send our love to Tristan Thompson. That is just a unimaginable thing that he is going through right now. So Kings fans, send him some love, as I've seen that come across my timeline a couple of times. We've been talking a lot, and Trist, I'd be curious to get your thoughts on this too, as I know you've been watching the Kings pretty closely. There's a microscope, it feels like, James, on the Kings bench right now, and their rotations, and it's guys are in, guys are out, they're playing, and then they're not. Like we noted the last time the Kings and the Lakers played, Neemias Queta was 5 for 5. Neemias Queta he's not even playing anymore. We tracked back to the Chicago game when Chimezie Metu, he went 5 for 5. And then every subsequent game, his minutes started to drop before he was out of the rotation. Well, what is Mike looking for?
What he's not looking for is someone who can score. I mean, in all honesty.
Well, he's got a whole bench who's incapable of scoring right now.
I mean, at the 5 position,
okay.
At the backup 5. So that backup 5 position, he's been very clear. Like, he wants someone who plays defense. He wants someone that will rebound. He wants someone that will set screens. And he wants somebody that is not going to go out and pick up 3 fouls in 2 minutes.
Defend without fouling.
And put you in foul trouble, like either at the end of the quarter or at the beginning of a quarter. And then, you pick up 2 or 3 quick fouls, and which is what Queta's done quite a few times. I'd say quite a few. Probably 2 of the 4 times he's played, he's got 3 fouls and like no time at all.
That's 50% of the time he plays.
So he wants him to rebound, and that's been a huge issue. And they all take turns like failing. They get to a certain point, and I think scoring 10 points for Keita, and the same thing I'll say about Chimezie Metu. The second he scored 10 points, it was like, it's like when a dude hits a home run in slow pitch softball, you might as well kick him off your team then. He's worthless from then on. All he does is fly out for the next 5 years. And like, that's what happens in slow pitch softball. You got dudes who hit home runs all the time. And then you got that dude on your team who hits one home run and then it ruins him forever. He just wants to hit home run. That's what it feels like with the bigs. They score 5 points, they score 10 points. All of a sudden they start to feel themselves and then they stop doing everything else. And it just becomes a disaster. And I'll say, unfortunately for Mike Brown, it's not just the center position. What's happening at the center position is impacting the other guys. Because once you pull one of those things out and they start to fail, then it makes it really hard for Malik Monk to get loose or even De'Aaron Fox to run with that second group when your center's not doing what he's supposed to be doing. And we're watching this second unit completely collapse over the last, I don't know, it was 3 or 4 games, right? Mm-hmm. There's been 2 games and I know they didn't score in double figures. And that's just unacceptable.
Hammy, what happened to our guy, Rashawn Holmes? I used to love him like maybe 2 years ago. He was the #1 roller, pick and roll in the NBA. We talked about this maybe last year when I would come on with you guys. He has declined to the point where he is unwatchable, unplayable, unusable. Why?
Well, first of all, the Kings don't run pick and rolls.
Yep.
Secondly, they no longer have Tyrese Halliburton, who is one of the best pick and roll passers that you're ever going to run into. Mm-hmm. I mean, look what he's doing in Indiana. He just is killing everybody in the pick and roll. That's what he does. They don't have a natural pick and roll guy. And then they're asking their bigs to do a lot more. They're supposed to be like screen setters and basically bumpers on the outside. Sabonis is a guy they're running the ball through the whole time. But when it comes to Holmes, like he still wants to roll to the basket. He doesn't set the screen. He more gets in the way than sets a screen. And it's just not what they're trying to do. And so it's a problem. And I think when he's not scoring, he's a guy that instantly starts to like struggle a little bit and loses focus. And he loses focus on the defensive end. He loses focus as a rebounder. There was a point where, I mean, Rashawn Holmes averaged 1.6 blocks per game like 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. Like, where is that? Because when we talk about him and what the Kings need, they need an active rim protecting rebounder that, you know, and you're looking at it, you're like, I'm describing Rashawn Holmes from 2 years ago. He's just not the same guy. He got poked in the eye a couple of times. One of them was horrific where he had to have like stitches in his eyeball last year. He got COVID. He had the off the court stuff. It really just kind of like knocked the wind out of him. And like, I still see him. I saw him like maybe 30 minutes ago, 45 minutes ago and said hello. And, you know, he's still cordial. He's still like, he seems like the same guy. He's just not the same player on the court. And it's hurting. It's hurting the team because he's a guy that if they would have known this is who he was now, they would have tried to move much harder during the offseason.
Yeah. You know, I saw the Memphis game was really, I guess, illuminating because Sabonis was getting absolutely eaten up by Steven Adams. Mm-hmm. Like Steven Adams, somebody that size, somebody that can do those things, obviously not him particularly, feels like somebody like that, maybe like a backup 5 for different matchups for the Kings. Like, is there any possibility there's somebody out there like that for the Kings to go after at the deadline?
Yeah, I mean, with Steven Adams in particular, I think that's Sabonis had just come back from the broken thumb. Like it was really new. And it's one thing to try it, like, again, you're going up against whoever for the Lakers tonight at center. It doesn't really matter. They can't hang with Sabonis at all. He doesn't need his hands to push around these guys. He can just drop a shoulder and get to the rim with no problems. You can't do that against Steven Adams. You need like every single thing that you can possibly throw at the guy. And the fact is Sabonis can only throw one hand at him. Mm-hmm. And he needed his teammates to step up and help him with Adams. And it never happened. And so at some point, I mean, Sabonis still had 14 rebounds in that game. He was really good. It was the fourth quarter where like the ball just seemed to find Steven Adams. And he's a great rebounder and he's a big, like thick dude who can just shove everyone around. But I just think that like that was one game where Sabonis just couldn't use his hand. And it's very seldom that you see that. I think Steven Adams is probably the only guy in the league that I would put in the same ballpark as far as strength as Sabonis. Yeah. And if you can't push, if you can't it's like a boxer. You can't go into a boxing match with one hand.
Mhm.
It's just not going to work out for you. And that's what I felt was the biggest issue.
James, going back or staying with the bench. Mike Brown's done a phenomenal job this year. He's done a phenomenal job. One of the questions I have about what's going on right now is it feels like in the first 15 games of the season, he was empowering that bench. We got 10, 11 guys that can go. And we going to go. Like, we going to get, and I know he's a defensive guy, but we all kind of marveled at it, right? Like, oh, he's a defensive guy, but man, him and Jay Triano, they got this offense buzzing. We talked about that clip that KD had on his podcast when he was like, yo, they got Metsu you got to worry about. Terrence Davis hit us for 31. Like, there's so much on offense. Like, we don't know what to do. It felt like Mike Brown was empowering the bench. Now it seems like he's kind of sucking the life out of some of these guys. When you talk about Terrence Davis not being able to be part of the rotation. I know, some people feel whatever about Metsu, but I thought he was part of what was going on in a positive way earlier in the season. And now he can't get off the bench. And you have the comments from Mike Brown when he was like, I'm looking for this. I need this and this and that. And it just seems like he has Terrence Davis and KZ be defensive player of the game one game and not play the next. He's got these guys on edge as opposed to empowering them and letting them maybe play through some of the mistakes and still get a feel for the game. Do you see the same thing with what's going on with this bench right now?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Before that, to answer Trista's question before, I keep saying it. I think the Kings should go trade for Mason Plumlee as the backup center because I think he does everything that they need. Plus, he also knows Triano's system. Plus, he knows how to pass. But to get to what your question is, look, guys fade in and out throughout the season. They have their moments. But the one thing we also know is the fun, crazy, up-tempo style that we saw in the first, 3-4 weeks of the season, other teams around the league are able to adjust, and they're able to take some of the things away. And the problem is that when you take something away from Sabonis, he can counter because that's how good of a player he is. When you take something away from Fox, he'll counter. Herter will find a way to get open. Some of these other guys, first of all, they're playing out of what their comfort zone was anyways. Chimezie Metu is not a passing big man. He's not a guy who sets a great screen either. And so when you start to take things away, they start going back to what they're comfortable with. And that's not what the coaching staff wants. So I was talking to someone about the telecast earlier today. And they're like, yeah, we haven't really seen those moments where Mike Brown is coaching on the court, like during a timeout. And it's like, well, because Terrence Davis isn't playing and he was always yelling at Terrence on the court. Like, there comes a point where as a coach, you got to go with guys that, number one, are adjusting properly, that are giving you a chance to win, and start relying heavier and heavier on some people. The one game that Malik Monk blew up 33 points, right? You remember who was coaching that game? Jordy. Okay, well, every game since, Malik's back to playing 18, 19, 20, 21 minutes a game. Like, there's something that happened in that game where he was clearly, like what you're saying, empowered by somebody to go do something. But not everyone steps up every game, and that's what we keep running into. We keep running into this problem. We got a bunch of guys who have never been this good needed to be this good for this long, like Herter, like Monk, or, they've always been part of something, but they haven't been such a big part of something. And it's hard to sustain that. It's hard to understand how to make an adjustment as a player and to be that player for 82 games or whatever it might be for you.
A lot of guys just cooking, just know how to cook, know how to get their own shot, know how to just be kind of singular, or they have certain skill sets, and then that doesn't really fit into the scheme.
Well, the other thing that I was saying, and you're right about that, but Terrence Davis, like where I'm, looking at is Terrence Davis, Metsu, and KZ Okpalu, and them not consistently or at all being part of the rotation. And you talk about, like, Mike Brown always had to talk to Terrence because Terrence was in the wrong spot. I get that, and I get how that can be frustrating. But what you're doing isn't really lighting the world on fire either. So why not go back to and I'm not saying they're going to win 7 in a row, but why not go back to, hey, I got to get Terrence in there. I got to find a way. This is coaching. I got to find a way to get the most out of Terrence. Is he going to give me what I want every single time? Probably not. But what I'm doing right now, where I've got an 8-man rotation and we're averaging like 20 points a game max from the bench, and I've got to play these starters 40 minutes a night. Like, that's not working. So I got to find a way to get the most out of Terrence Davis and Metu. Not playing them isn't really helping us right now.
Yeah, but you can only play so many guys. And I'll even say, like, I know, what's your line? Today's price, yesterday's price is not today's price.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that it kind of goes the same way. Like, a player who was good 2 weeks ago might not be good now in your system. And that's up to them. It's up to them to buy in and fully stay locked in on what they're supposed to do, and then to make the adjustments that the other players, that the opponent is doing. And I'll bring up Trey Lyles. I think Trey Lyles, the last 5 or 6 games, has been superb. And you know why? Because he's hitting the glass. And he saw the same thing that all of us did when Steven Adams took them to the woodshed. And you're just like, holy cow. And he's taken a mental approach to say, I have got to be a guy who goes and gets rebounds. And so not only did that translate to him getting more minutes at the 4, all of a sudden he's starting to play the backup 5 role as well. And it's not because he's a lockdown center. It's because he's going and doing something, one of those things that Mike Brown has asked him to do. He's making the adjustments on the court that are necessary. And some of these other guys aren't. And we talked about it all the way from the beginning of the season. There's going to be maybe a 9-man rotation, and that 9th man is going to go from one player to the next, one game to the next. Sometimes it is KZ Okpala who gets those minutes. Sometimes it is Terrence Davis. But when Trey Lyles is rolling and he's playing really well, you got to feed the guy who's actually listening and doing the things, making the adjustments, and sort of promote that, like, this is, we're asking you guys to do specific things. This guy figured it out. Go do what he's doing. And for a long time, I thought Chimezie Metu had kind of figured that out. But I also feel like he lost his way a little bit. And it's hard for someone to, like, once they lose their way and you're out of the rotation, like, getting back in isn't easy. You're dealing with 3 or 4 other guys that are all clamoring for that same spot in the 9-man rotation.
Well, but isn't that kind of like what Mike Brown is supposed to be doing too, is trying to figure out a way to motivate each player individually and find out what buttons push them, or whoever his, the lieutenants on the staff are, to work with these players individually to know what gets them going and, what tunes them out?
Yeah, I totally agree. But at the same time, like, what are the Kings? Are they 7-8 over the last 15 games? They're actually really, if you look at the schedule and you saw at the beginning of the season, you looked at that stretch of games, you go, oh, 7-8? No way. There's no way they'd go 7-8. And now you're looking at them going, okay, like 7-8, they had some battles. They had 2 games where they messed up and they let teams get by them, but they rebounded. They went 3-3 on the trip. They went 3-3 at home. Even after 2 really bad losses, they battled Denver on a back-to-back and came away with one of the wins. They've got 2 wins against the Utah Jazz, which is not only huge for you, but it also stymies one of your competition and, like, shoves them down in the, break it up category. So I think they have done a really good job. And now you look at this section of the schedule, it's like 7 or 8 games against all sub-500 teams. I want to see where they look like at the end of this stretch before I really want to say, how do they look in this, in that 15-game stretch? Because I think it's part of the same conversation. You got the ebbs and flows of the schedule and injuries and all that stuff. You're holding on for dear life most of the time. And you're just hoping that, you can motivate 8 or 9 guys to do the right things each and every game. And when you put a guy out there and he doesn't get it, or he's not focused, or he's not doing exactly what you want, get him out. And that's what Mike Brown's done. I think his adjustments on the fly, it doesn't feel good to some of these players, but it's necessary. Like, there hasn't been a game where I thought, I wonder why he did that. Every single time I go, okay, I saw Neemias Queta drop 4 rebounds, and I saw Rashawn Holmes come in, and I was like, oh, okay, that makes perfect sense to me. I watched Rashawn Holmes look like he was totally lost on a basketball court, and Chimezie Metu took his spot, and I'm like, okay, like, I don't know that that's what I would have done, but it's certainly something had to be done. Even the Alex Len start, that was the right play. Like, you're going up against a 2-time reigning MVP. You don't stick Nemias Keita, a two-way player, out there and say, all right, big boy, go ahead and try to stop that guy. Like, you're asking for 6 fouls in 8 minutes. That's what you're asking for. And it's not just that he's out of the game. It's that now you got to deal with the 6 fouls that you picked
Right.
up, and how many times are they going to be at the free throw line because of those 6 fouls? And so, like, I don't think that they've really missed all that much this season. I think Mike Brown's done a good job, but sometimes you guys miss shots. Sometimes a guy goes crazy and scores a bunch of points, or sometimes a guy goes crazy and gets a bunch of rebounds. Those things happen.
So that you think the play of those second unit players, is that on them or on Mike Brown?
Well, look, I mean, in a perfect world,
And maybe that's not fair. Maybe it's on them or on the coaching staff.
I'll say this, in a perfect world, you got better players to play those minutes. You got 2 guys or 3 guys that do exactly what you need. So right now, Mike Brown is out there whittling a square peg and trying to make it fit into a round hole all the time.
But you say that, like, we know you and I even think one time Mike was definitive in what he wanted from the secondary bigs.
Yeah.
But like Terrence Davis, what does he want from Terrence?
Well, the problem that you have with Terrence is that they went out and got Malik Monk, and they went out and got Kevin Huerter, and you have Davion Mitchell, and then, oh, by the way, you got a 35-minute a game guy in De'Aaron Fox.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the problem. And there are some nights where you can go small with Terrence at the 3, but the problem that this team has is very clear, is that they don't have that 4 that can block shots, that can rebound, that can do the dirty work, that makes it easier to play a guy like Terrence. That's the problem. It's like, you can't mix, we always do the Batman, the original Batman, don't mix the shampoo and the deodorant, or you'll
it'll
die.
kill you.
Yeah, it'll kill you. Yeah. So, but that's the problem. Like, Trey Lyles and Terrence Davis are 2 guys that really, I don't know, that can play together. And you have these players that, if you look around, they aren't natural fits together, and they're missing. Again, if you had Jaren Jackson Jr. on this team, like, everything falls into place. If you had Lauri Markkanen on this team, everything falls into place, and you can make a bunch of other moves at the 3 that, to gamble with a guy like Terrence, or, whatever it might be.
It's just dropped 49.
Oh my God.
49 freaking points. I thought he just did that stuff against the Kings. He
Lauri
dropped
Bird.
49.
Tell you that
Yeah.
boy,
The dude is
Lauri
on
Bird
a
is
tear
crazy.
right now.
Yeah,
Could they get Markkanen? Is there any way that they could trade for him?
Yeah, we've talked about this, and, like, it really does depend. Number one, if Utah is gonna sell, but I'm gonna keep saying that it's very possible that Utah does sell, because Danny Ainge is a guy who likes to have the mystique of Danny Ainge as much as anything else. And the fact that he was able to get 2 or 3 first-round picks for Donovan Mitchell, and then could take the other piece that he got from that trade and turn that into another 2 or 3 first-round picks, all of a sudden he looks like a genius who went out and got 11 first-round picks for 2 guys. And that's something that I think he would listen to. And if I'm the Kings, it's probably going to cost you one of 2 things. Well, maybe one of 3 things. You'd probably have to negotiate with Atlanta and take protections off your pick for Kevin Huerter. And so you would have more range in your picks. So you might be able to give up a 2023 and a 2027 if Atlanta would take a 2025 pick. So I think it would take 2 first-round picks, or it would take Keegan Murray and something else.
Ooh.
But, like we say, but he's a 25-year-old guy who's under contract for 2.5 seasons, who's averaging
Would you do it?
23.5 points.
I think I would.
23 and 8, and he's
I think I would.
He's a perfect fit.
He's a perfect fit. He's a
next
perfect
next
fit.
to Sabonis. He's
Yeah.
a perfect fit.
The only hesitation that
Oh
I
my
would
God.
have is Lauri Markkanen has an injury history, and he hasn't been injured this year, but this is like the first time he hasn't been injured.
Yeah, but you know what? Like, the player I think we're starting to see him become a little bit more like is Michael Porter Jr. Right? He's just this, like, rangy, crazy, like, can do all this stuff. He doesn't have that kind of injury history.
No, he don't have it like that.
No.
But I mean, skill, to me at least, skill was never the issue with Lauri Markkanen. I loved him at Arizona. He just wasn't able to stay on the floor. And when you talk about trading Harrison Barnes or Rashawn Holmes, that's one thing. When you talk about trading Keegan Murray
Ooh.
for somebody with sketchy
And
injury
I keep
history.
telling you guys, I'm not promoting that
No,
that
no,
the
you're
Kings go
not.
trade
Yeah.
Keegan Murray. I'm
But
just
that's
telling
the
you that
price.
What
it's,
it's going to take.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
the price.
like-
It's not what it sounds like to me, Hammer.
Okay, so somebody in the chat said that somebody like Clint Capella might be a fit. What do you think about that scenario?
no, because Clint is a natural pick and roll guy. Like, is he a bigger version of Rashawn Holmes? Sure, but the Kings don't run that offense.
He's not a
And-
fit
Right.
for Mike Brown.
Right.
Yeah, he's not, and he's not a fit for Jay Triano's system. I don't even really know who the perfect fit is, but even I'll say this: even if you got Lauri Markkanen, you still need that set. You still need Mason Plumlee,
Yes.
and so that's where like it's kind of, if you look at the way that the Golden State Warriors are built with Draymond and Looney, like you need something
You need
similar
Looney.
to Looney.
Yeah.
But you also need that player to be able to pass, because that's just not what Looney does.
Mhm.
But you need a strong man like that. And that's where I really do think that a guy like Mason Plumlee fits, because he does have the passing element. And he does know Jay Triano's offense. Again, I don't think he's on an expiring deal. He's 32 years old. What's it going to cost you? A second round pick and a couple of expiring contracts. And you land a guy who really could change not only your offense, but also he's a really good defensive player. He can hold his own. He can go get you rebounds in a pinch. He's kind of like a guy who he knows his role. And when I say like you got to get a better player, that doesn't mean that Chimezie Metu can't be a good NBA player, or Trey Lyles or Terrence Davis or any of those guys. But Mason Plumlee is defined in who and what he is. If he's in your 8 or 9 man rotation, he stays there, and you know exactly what you're getting from him each and every night. These other guys, you still don't know what you're getting each and every night. And it's really hard for Mike Brown to like expect, KZ Okpala to come in and give him honest minutes when he talked about this today at practice. Like, how many minutes has KZ Okpala played in his career? Like and how many of those minutes were real minutes, not scrub time minutes? That we don't have a sample size for him. And so it's hard to put your faith and your trust in somebody and leave them out there when they don't have a track record for doing it, especially when you're already doing that with Keegan Murray, because he's your young guy who you're putting all your faith in, and you're bringing one guy along and allowing him to make some mistakes, like getting beat in crunch time. But you can't have multiple guys like that that are making mistakes.
Sometimes you got to do it. Sometimes you got to do it. And especially when that's your problem. Like, you can't guard anybody. What's the alternative? Not put him out there and still keep getting beat on the perimeter? Because the guys that he is playing, they're not getting the job done in that respect. It'd be one thing if like you didn't want to wear down Harrison Barnes and he's a lockdown on the perimeter and he's keeping guys out of the middle, but I have to play this guy 42 because he's the only one that can do it. No, I'm not shading Harrison, but they're not doing it either. So like, what's the alternative? You just keep on not having it get done, or you say, hey, let me take a chance with KZ here, or I know this isn't the best fit, but let me take a chance with TD right here for 3-4 games and see if we can improve in that area.
What if I told you that, as someone who's watched the Sacramento Kings for as many years as that you have, and as many years as I've covered them, that we are so preconditioned to watching players who aren't good enough to be on the floor? We're so conditioned because the Kings don't have 5 or 6 guys that are good enough to be out there for 40 minutes a game. And so we're so used to somebody who realistically isn't good enough to help a team win 30 games.
Mm.
And so you're like, well, just give him a shot, because, we've seen it so many times. Like, how,
Let's just try it out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, for like the year before I started covering this team, John Brockman, like, he played serious minutes for this team.
Yeah, that's
My
crazy.
first year, Pooh Jeter played minutes for this team. Antoine Wright, Luther Head,
Wow.
Darnell Jackson,
This is
Donnell Jones?
This is a hell of a list.
like it's Dante Green. Like I could keep going. Like there's so many players from that team.
Luther Head sounds like a Vince McMahon creation, not a former Sacramento King.
7 players were no
cartoon
longer on the
character.
roster, right? 7 players were no longer in the NBA a year later. Okay, so the team we talked about, the Monty McNair's first team,
Mhm.
how many guys are not in the NBA from
A
his
lot
first
of
roster?
them.
And we're
Yeah.
talking Whiteside.
So some of them he signed.
Yeah, Whiteside
Robinson,
and Glenn
Hassan
Robinson,
Whiteside, yeah.
right? But Justin Jackson, I mean,
Mhm.
I'm Justin James. Who is the other guy, the crazy leaper who was on a two-way now? Daquan Jeffries, Kyle Guy, Nemanja Bjelica is no longer in the league.
Mhm.
Jabari Parker. So what I'm saying
But
is that
Bjelica chose that path.
He
by the
at
way.
34, he chose that
He
path.
chose that path.
But my point is that are we so conditioned as people who have watched his team forever that we're so used to these guys who are fringe NBA players and we're saying, just go ahead and give them a shot. It's like, that's not the goal this year. The goal this year is to snap a 16-year playoff drought. And that requires really good players because you're not just fighting against 15 other teams in the Western Conference. You're fighting against 16 years of absolute drag that's pulling you back in every single step of the way. And so it's tough, but like, I hope these guys figure it out, but that's not what this year is about for the Kings.